Can you stay one night? The lonely CEO had everything except someone to share Christmas with. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Snow fell quietly over Manhattan that Christmas Eve, the kind of snow that softened the city's noise and turned every streetlight into a halo. Inside a glass tower that pierced the night sky, Alexander Hayes stood alone in his corner office. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected a man who had everything: wealth, power, a skyline view that most people would only dream of, but whose eyes held the dull emptiness of someone who had long stopped believing in joy. His assistant had left hours ago. The rest of the staff were home, probably wrapping gifts or laughing around fireplaces. But Alexander stayed. He always stayed. He told himself it was because of work, because the company never slept, because leadership demanded sacrifice. But deep down, he knew it was because he had no one waiting for him. The clock struck 9. The office lights hummed. Outside, flakes of snow drifted like confetti over a city celebrating without him. On his desk sat a single unopened Christmas card from his late wife's parents, sent every year since the accident. He hadn't had the courage to throw them away or open them. He picked up the card, stared at the neat handwriting, and then set it back down. The silence felt heavy, almost alive. Then 3 soft knocks at the door. "Mr. Hayes?" a voice called. He frowned. No one should still be here. When the door opened, a young woman in a nurse's jacket stepped inside, brushing snow from her hair. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her breath visible in the cold. "The elevator stopped working because of the storm. I was assigned to the health station on the lower floor, but the power outage trapped me here. I just needed somewhere warm until it clears." For a second, Alexander said nothing. She looked out of place in this world of marble floors and silent machines, too human, too real. "You're welcome to stay in the lounge downstairs," he said flatly. "I don't think the heat's working there," she replied softly, hugging her arms for warmth. A pause. Then, almost reluctantly, he gestured toward the couch near the fireplace. "Fine. Just for tonight." She smiled, small, grateful, genuine, and that smile, fragile as it was, cracked something in him. "Thank you, sir." As she moved closer to the fire, her reflection appeared beside his in the window, 2 strangers caught in the same storm. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, hesitated, then offered her hot cocoa from the minibar instead. She accepted it, her fingers trembling slightly as she took the cup. For the first time in years, the office didn't feel so empty. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the city below. But inside the penthouse, something fragile and quiet began to stir, something Alexander hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. And as the night deepened, he caught himself wondering, not about the market or the next quarter, but about her, the stranger who'd walked into his loneliness on Christmas Eve. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence between them. The storm outside grew heavier, wind brushing against the glass like a restless hand. Lila sat quietly on the couch, hands wrapped around the warm cup of cocoa he had given her. Alexander leaned against his desk, pretending to check his phone, but his eyes drifted toward her more than once. She was young, maybe late 20s, with tired eyes that still carried a light of calmness. He noticed how her scrubs were slightly worn, her hair damp from the snow, but she did not seem bothered. She looked comfortable, even in a place that screamed power and wealth. "So," she said after a while, her voice gentle but firm, "you really plan on working through Christmas?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What else should I do? Maybe not work?" she said with a small smile. "Maybe just live for one night?" He almost laughed, but stopped himself. "Living does not pay the bills. Neither does loneliness," she replied. The words landed sharper than he expected. He looked at her again. She was not being rude, just honest. There was no judgment in her tone, only truth. He found himself strangely disarmed by it. "You are direct," he said finally. "Nursing does that to you," she answered. "When you see people fighting to stay alive, you stop wasting words." Her gaze softened. "I guess I just do not understand how someone with everything can still look so lost." Alexander's throat tightened. "And you think you understand me already?" "No," she said, "but I have seen that look before." He stayed quiet, turning back to the window. Outside, the city was fading under the curtain of snow. A soft reflection in the glass showed them both the millionaire and the nurse, two people from worlds that were never meant to meet. Minutes passed before he spoke again. "What about you?" he asked. "Why are you working on Christmas Eve?" "Double pay," she said simply, then shrugged. "And my apartment's heating broke, so being on duty was actually a better deal." She smiled like it was no big thing, but he caught the faint shiver in her voice. Without a word, he adjusted the thermostat from his phone. Warm air began to hum through the vents. "Better?" "Much," she said, surprised. "Thank you." "Consider it hazard pay," he replied. For the first time, a small smirk crossed his face. She smiled back. Something easy settled between them, a fragile peace neither had felt in a long time. Later, as midnight crept closer, the storm showed no sign of stopping. The city below had gone quiet, swallowed by white. Lila had curled up on the couch, half asleep. Alexander sat across from her, reading an old report but not really seeing the words. He looked up when she stirred and murmured, "You should sleep too. It is Christmas." "Christmas," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word for the first time in years. "It used to mean something." "It still can," she said without opening her eyes. He watched her for a long moment. She looked peaceful, fragile in the glow of the firelight. For reasons he could not name, he whispered, "You can stay as long as you need." She smiled faintly, already drifting into sleep. The clock hit midnight. Outside, the storm began to ease, snow falling slower, softer. Alexander turned off the lights, except for the fire, and sat in silence, listening to the faint sound of her breathing mixing with the crackle of the flames. For the first time in 3 Christmases, he did not feel like a ghost haunting his own success. He felt present. Alive. Maybe it was the warmth, maybe it was her. But as the snow settled over the city, he realized something simple and terrifying. He did not want the night to end. The morning light filtered through the tall glass windows, painting soft streaks of gold across the marble floor. The storm had finally passed. Alexander stirred awake in the chair near the fireplace, still wearing last night's suit jacket, his head slightly tilted toward the couch where Lila slept. She had curled up beneath a wool blanket, her face calm, framed by strands of brown hair that caught the light. For a brief second, he forgot who he was, the CEO, the figure everyone feared or admired. Right now, he was just a man watching someone breathe quietly in the morning warmth. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the smell filling the still air, and then poured another for her. "You drink it black or with sugar?" he asked when she blinked awake. She sat up, blinking at the light. "With a little sugar," she murmured, rubbing her eyes. He smiled faintly and handed her the cup. "Merry Christmas." She froze for a second, surprised. "Merry Christmas to you too." They sipped in silence. Outside, the streets below were buried under fresh snow. A few people were already out shoveling or walking dogs. The city was beginning to stir again. "I should probably head back soon," she said quietly, setting the cup down. "They will need me at the clinic." "The roads will still be bad," he said. "You can wait a little longer." "You do not like being alone, do you?" she asked gently. His jaw tightened. "I am used to it. Being used to something does not mean it is good for you." She gave him a small, knowing smile and then glanced toward his desk. Her eyes landed on the unopened Christmas card. "Is that from your family?" "From my wife's," he said after a pause. "She passed 3 years ago." The words felt heavy, but saying them aloud was strangely freeing. Lila nodded slowly. "I am sorry. Do not be. I made peace with it," he lied. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she picked up her small bag and coat. "Do you ever talk about her?" "No," he said quickly. "Why would I?" "Because pretending not to feel is still a kind of feeling," she said softly. The truth of it hit him like cold air. She did not push further, just smiled gently and reached into her pocket. "Here," she said, pulling out a small notebook with a blue cover. "It is something I do every day. I call it my gratitude journal. When life feels heavy, I write 3 good things that happened, even if they are small." He looked down at it, confused. "Why give it to me?" "Because you look like someone who forgot what good things feel like," she said, then added playfully, "You can return it when you find 3 of your own." He did not know what to say. She buttoned her coat and walked to the door. "Lila," he said, and she turned. "Thank you for last night." She smiled softly. "For you, it was a night. For me, it was a reminder that people can still be kind." and then she was gone. The office felt too quiet again. Alexander stared at the small blue notebook on his desk. He flipped it open. Inside were simple handwritten lines. December 23. Shared soup with a patient who could not afford lunch. December 24. Saw snowfall on the hospital roof. December 25. Found warmth where I least expected it. He traced that last sentence with his thumb, then picked up a pen. His hand hovered before he finally wrote, December 25. A stranger reminded me I am still human. He closed the notebook slowly, the faintest smile forming on his lips. Outside, sunlight bounced off the snowy rooftops of Manhattan, and for the first time in years, Alexander Hayes looked forward to something beyond the next meeting, the next profit report, the next lonely night. Somewhere inside, a door he had long kept locked had quietly begun to open. The following week passed faster than Alexander expected. Meetings, reports, and endless calls filled his schedule, but his thoughts kept circling back to the woman who had spent one quiet Christmas night in his office. Lila. He caught himself checking the lobby every morning, half expecting to see her walk in with her coffee and tired smile. The gratitude journal she left behind stayed on his desk, a constant reminder of something he did not quite understand yet but could not ignore. One late afternoon, as snow began to fall again outside, his assistant Claire stepped into his office. "Sir, there is a charity request from the Westbridge Community Clinic. They are asking for sponsorship." Alexander looked up. Westbridge? Yes, a small medical center downtown. They provide free health care to low-income families. The proposal was handwritten. They are asking for basic supplies, new beds, and a heating system. She placed the envelope on his desk. His pulse jumped when he recognized the neat handwriting on the cover. It was Lila's. For a long moment he did not say a word. Then, quietly, he said, "Approve it. Triple their budget." Claire blinked. "Triple? That is quite generous, sir." "Then call it a tax write-off," he said, but his voice was softer than usual. That night he stayed long after everyone had gone, the gratitude journal open beside him. He read her words again and again. "Found warmth where I least expected it." He wondered if she knew what those words had done to him. 2 days later he went to the clinic unannounced. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with small shops and streetlights glowing against the cold dusk. The clinic was old, with peeling paint and a hand-drawn sign taped to the glass door. Open for everyone. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and instant coffee. Lila was there, wearing her scrubs, helping a little boy wrap a bandage around his arm. She looked up, startled when she saw him standing in the doorway. "Mr. Hayes?" she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, suddenly unsure how to explain. "I came to check on an investment," he said. She laughed softly. "You mean the donation? That was very generous. You did not have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. "I owed someone a favor." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Well, the heater works perfectly now, so consider your favor repaid." He walked around, noticing the cracked tiles and mismatched furniture. Yet there was warmth here that his skyscraper never had. People greeted Lila with genuine affection. A little girl handed her a paper star she had made. "For the Christmas tree," the girl said. Lila smiled, taking it gently. "Thank you, sweetheart." Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. When the crowd thinned, he said quietly, "You run this place like it is home." "For some people it is," she replied. "You would be surprised how far kindness can stretch." He nodded, looking down at the paper star in her hand. "That is why I came," he said. "I think I would like to help more than just with money." "You?" she teased. "The man who never takes a day off?" "Maybe I am learning," he said, smiling faintly. "Do you take volunteers?" "We take hearts that care," she said simply. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Alexander felt something steady, something real anchor inside him. He took a deep breath and looked around the clinic again. "Then I guess I am staying for a while," he said. Lila's smile widened, soft and genuine. "Welcome to Westbridge, Mr. Hayes." Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and quiet. But this time, Alexander did not watch it from a glass tower alone. He was standing beside her, in a place where warmth did not come from money or power, but from people who still believed in healing. Alexander kept his word. Every Friday evening after work, he drove across the city to the Westbridge Community Clinic. At first, The staff looked at him with quiet surprise. The CEO, who once lived behind glass walls, was now stacking boxes, checking supply lists, and pouring coffee for patients waiting in line. It felt strange, humbling, almost peaceful. He began learning names: Mrs. Thompson with the worn red scarf, who came for her diabetes checkups, the Ortiz twins, who always shared one lollipop, and Lila, who seemed to exist everywhere at once, comforting, fixing, smiling. The more he watched her, the more he saw what he had lost in himself. One evening after the clinic closed, he found her sitting alone at the front desk, filling out charts under the dim light. "You work too much," he said, leaning against the doorway. She laughed softly. "That is a dangerous statement coming from you." "Touch," he said with a small grin. "But you could at least take a night off." "And do what?" she asked. "Go home to my empty apartment and eat canned soup?" "You make it sound tragic." "It is practical," she said with a shrug. "I cannot afford tragedy." Her honesty hit him like cold air. "Then let me take you somewhere better than soup," he said. "Just dinner, nothing fancy." She hesitated, then smiled. "If you promise not to check your emails." "Deal." The next evening they met at a small diner 2 blocks away, a place she liked because the waitress called everyone sweetheart. The meal was simple, pancakes and coffee, but something about it felt extraordinary. He told her about his late wife, about how guilt had driven him into work until he could not feel anything anymore. She listened without interruption, her expression soft, not pitying, just present. When he finished, she said quietly, "You cannot punish yourself forever." She would not want that. "You sound so sure." "Because love never asks for suffering," she said. Her words lingered in the air between them. After that night, Alexander came to the clinic more often, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He helped paint the walls, repaired broken chairs, and even organized a fundraiser. One Saturday, as they cleaned storage together, he accidentally knocked over a box, scattering files everywhere. Lila laughed so hard she could barely breathe. "You might be the worst volunteer we have ever had," she teased. "Good thing you are the boss," he said, trying to hide his grin. "Do not tell anyone," she replied, still laughing. That laughter echoed in his mind for days. By the time spring arrived, the clinic had transformed. New equipment filled the rooms, the heating worked perfectly, and the walls were covered with drawings from children who had been treated there. Alexander had also changed. He had started sleeping again, eating properly, and most importantly, smiling. But one morning when he walked into the clinic, he found Lila sitting at her desk looking worried. "What happened?" he asked. "Our grant renewal was denied," she said quietly. "Without it, we cannot keep the free program for next month." He looked around at the patients in the waiting room, the children coloring on the floor, and the elderly man reading a newspaper. He could not let this place fall apart. "Do not worry," he said. "I have an idea." "Alexander, you have already done so much." "Not enough," he said. "Let me handle this." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but whatever you are planning, make sure it comes from your heart, not your guilt." He smiled faintly. "It comes from both," he said honestly. As he walked out into the sunlight, he already knew what he would do. This time, he was not writing a check from his company. He was writing one from himself. 3 days later, the conference hall at Hayes Corporation looked nothing like its usual boardroom. Instead of suits and briefcases, it was filled with banners, soft lights, and volunteers from the Westbridge Clinic setting up tables covered with photos of smiling patients. Alexander stood at the entrance, adjusting his tie nervously. This was not a business meeting. It was the first charity gala he had personally organized, dedicated entirely to keeping the clinic alive. The idea had come to him the moment Lila mentioned the lost grant. He had called in every favor he had, convincing investors, partners, and old friends to attend. But deep down, he was not doing this for reputation or publicity. He was doing it for her. When Lila arrived, she stopped short at the sight of the transformed room. "Alexander, what is all this?" she asked softly. "A fundraiser," he said, smiling. "You once said kindness can stretch far. I am just testing your theory." She laughed, eyes glistening. "You did all this?" "We did," he corrected. "You inspired it." The event began as the lights dimmed and the room buzzed with quiet conversation. Alexander took the stage, looking out over the crowd. For a man who had spent his life giving presentations worth millions, this moment felt heavier than any business deal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, 3 years ago, I lost someone I loved. Since then, I forgot what it meant to connect, to care, to give without expecting return. But a few months ago, I met someone who reminded me that compassion still exists. That healing is not always found in hospitals, it can be found in people. He looked toward Lila, who stood near the back, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. Tonight, we are not raising money for profit, he continued. We are raising it for hope. For every person who walks into Westbridge feeling invisible. For every nurse who believes one act of kindness can change a life. Applause filled the room. Lila blinked back tears. As guests began to donate, the numbers quickly surpassed their goal. Within an hour, the clinic's future was secure. But Alexander was not watching the figures climb on the screen. He was watching Lila, and the way her expression softened, a mixture of pride and gratitude that he had never seen directed at him before. When the event ended, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind the soft echo of laughter and music. Lila found him outside on the balcony, looking over the glittering skyline. "You just saved the clinic?" she said quietly. "No," he replied, turning toward her. "You saved me first." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city stretched out below them, alive and endless. Finally, she said, "You do realize you cannot just fix everything with money, right?" He smiled faintly. "Then teach me the other ways." She shook her head but smiled too. "You already learned the most important one showing up." He laughed softly. "So what happens now?" "Now?" she said, leaning on the railing beside him. "We keep helping people. And maybe we start believing that second chances are real." He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since his wife's passing, the ache in his chest eased. "Do you believe in them?" he asked. "I do now," she whispered. A soft breeze lifted her hair, and in that quiet moment, the city below faded. There was only them, two people who had found something neither of them was looking for. As they stood there, side by side, Alexander realized that this feeling of being seen, of being needed, was the one thing all his wealth could never buy. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. The following weeks felt different, softer somehow. The city was thawing from winter, and so was Alexander. He still ran Hayes Corporation, but his mornings began at the clinic before heading to his office. He had traded power lunches for soup kitchen shifts, luxury meetings for real conversations. Lila noticed the change every time he walked through the door, his posture more relaxed, his eyes warmer, his voice carrying something she had not heard before: peace. One afternoon, as they organized the storage room together, she teased, "You know, for a CEO, you are getting pretty good at sorting medical supplies." "Do not underestimate transferable skills," he said, trying not to smile. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Which part of corporate strategy involves bandages and syringes?" "The part where I learned to fix things instead of replace them," he replied quietly. The meaning behind his words hung between them. She looked at him, realizing he was not just talking about the supplies. "Alexander," she said softly, "you do not have to keep proving you have changed. I already know." He exhaled slowly. "Maybe I am not proving it to you. Maybe I am proving it to myself." That night, as the clinic lights dimmed, they sat together in the waiting area, sipping coffee from paper cups. It had become their small ritual. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. "Not the clinic," she said, misunderstanding for a moment. "The city, the noise, the constant rush." She shook her head. "I used to, but then I realized home is not about quiet or noise. It is about where you feel needed." "And you feel needed here?" "Every day," she said simply. He nodded, staring at his reflection in the dark window. "I envy that. For years I thought being needed meant being indispensable to a company, a brand, a stock price. But it is not the same, is it?" "No," she said. "Being needed means someone's world would feel colder without you." He turned to her, eyes searching. "Would yours?" She froze, caught off guard by the sudden sincerity. "Alexander, I am not asking for an answer," he said quickly, his tone soft. "I just needed to ask." She looked down at her cup, her heartbeat unsteady. "You have done so much good," she said instead. "Maybe it is time to do something for yourself." "What if this is for myself?" he asked. She met his gaze then, and neither looked away. Outside, rain began to fall, faint at first, then steady. She smiled gently. "You should head home before the roads flood." "Home," he echoed. the word foreign on his tongue. "I think I am still figuring out where that is." "You will," she said. "Sometimes home finds you when you stop looking." He chuckled softly. "You always talk like that? Like every sentence belongs on a hospital wall?" "Only on good days," she said, smiling. He stood, grabbing his coat. "Then I hope you have many more of those." "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Lila." As he stepped outside, the rain hit his face, cold and cleansing. For the first time in years, he did not rush to his car. He walked, letting the rain soak through his clothes. Something inside him was shifting, something he could not name but could finally feel. That night, when he returned to his penthouse, he found the blue gratitude journal still on his desk. He opened it to the page she had written last. Beneath her final entry he wrote, April 12, "Found purpose where I least expected it." He closed the notebook and placed it beside his late wife's photograph. For the first time, the guilt did not crush him, it simply existed, quieter, almost at peace. As he looked out over the city lights, one thought lingered in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, healing was not about forgetting the pain, but about learning to live with it, and still choosing to care anyway. 2 months later, spring had fully taken over Manhattan. The snow was gone, replaced by blooming trees and open windows. The Westbridge Clinic was busier than ever, thanks to the new funding. But Alexander's visits had become less frequent. The company was preparing for a major merger, and his time was pulled back into the corporate world he had once escaped. Lila noticed his absence, though she never said it aloud. One evening, as she finished her rounds, she saw the blue notebook sitting on the front desk. It was the same gratitude journal she had given him, but now it was filled to the last page. Attached to it was a note in his handwriting. "For you. I finally found my 3 good things." She opened it carefully, her fingers trembling. The last entries read, May 2, the clinic laughter that reminded me what hope sounds like. May 3, a life worth living again. May 4, her. Lila's breath caught. She closed the notebook slowly, holding it against her chest. That night she could not sleep. She replayed every word he had ever said to her, every look, every quiet gesture. The next morning, she decided to see him. When she arrived at Hayes Tower, the receptionist told her he was in a meeting with the board. She waited in the lobby for nearly an hour until the doors opened. Alexander stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, looking every bit the CEO again. But when he saw her, something in his expression softened. "Lila," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "You left this at the clinic," she said, handing him the journal. "I thought you might want it back." He looked at it, then shook his head gently. "No, it belongs there now. It started with you." She smiled faintly. "You have been busy. Trying to be," he said. "But it feels different this time. Less like running away." "That is good," she said quietly. He hesitated before asking, "Will you walk with me?" They stepped outside onto the plaza, the city alive with spring. People passed by carrying coffee and laughter, but the world around them felt suspended just for a moment. "You know," he said, "when I started this merger, everyone told me it would make me richer than ever, but I realized something." "What is that?" "Money can build towers, but it cannot build peace." She smiled. "You sound like a man who finally believes his own advice." "Maybe I am," he said. They walked in silence until they reached the corner, where the smell of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor filled the air. He bought 2 small paper bags and handed her one. "Do you still write in your journal?" he asked. "Every night," she said, "even the bad days, especially the bad ones." "Then write this down," he said softly. "Today, a stubborn CEO finally learned how to be human." She laughed, shaking her head. "That one might need a few edits." "Then make them," he said. "You have been editing me since the day we met." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Alexander, what do you really want?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "To keep feeling like this. Alive, needed, connected." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "Then do not lose it," she said. "Do not go back to that tower and forget. What if I cannot help it?" "Then I will remind you," she said simply. The city noise faded around them. For a heartbeat, time stood still. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing hers. "You already have," he whispered. They stood there, surrounded by life, yet completely in their own quiet world. For the first time, Alexander did not feel like he was falling or fighting. He felt grounded, anchored by something real. As they turned to walk back, Lila glanced at him and smiled. "Maybe home really does find you when you stop looking." And this time, he believed her. 6 months later, the city glowed under a warm summer sunset. The Westbridge Clinic had doubled in size, its new wing dedicated to pediatric care now fully operational. The front lobby had been renovated with light oak furniture, soft green walls, and a sign above the entrance that read, "The Hayes Community Center." Alexander stood in front of it, his hands in his pockets, a quiet pride softening his usually sharp demeanor. Lila approached from behind, her hair tied loosely, her smile bright. "It is beautiful," she said, looking around. "You did it." "We did it," he corrected gently. "You built this place with your heart. I just followed the blueprint." "A very expensive blueprint," she teased, and he laughed softly. "Worth every dollar," he said. The opening ceremony had drawn a small crowd of volunteers, patients, and local families. The air buzzed with laughter and the sound of children playing. Alexander watched as a little boy tugged on Lila's sleeve to show her a drawing of a smiling stick figure in a suit. "That is you, Mr. Hayes," the boy said proudly. Alexander knelt to the boy's level, smiling. "That is quite the resemblance," he said. "Except I think you made me taller." The boy giggled and ran off. Lila looked at Alexander with warmth in her eyes. "You have changed, you know." "So they tell me," he said. "But the truth is, I just finally remembered who I wanted to be." The sun dipped lower, spilling gold across the clinic windows. Inside, a soft melody played from a small speaker, a local choir performing for the event. Alexander turned to Lila. "There is something I wanted to show you," he said. He led her into the new wing, down a short hallway that ended in a small garden courtyard. In the center stood a stone bench beneath a maple tree, with a bronze plaque set into the base. She read the inscription aloud. "In memory of Emily Hayes, whose kindness lives on through every act of care." Her voice trembled slightly. "You did this for her? For both of you," he said quietly. "You once told me healing is not about forgetting pain. It is about learning to live with it and still choosing to care. You were right." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "Alexander, when Emily died, I thought love ended with loss," he said. "But you showed me it does not. It changes, grows, finds new ways to exist. I found peace because of you, Lila." For a long moment, she could not speak. Then she reached for his hand. "She would be proud of you." "I hope so," he said softly. The choir's song drifted through the open window, faint but steady. He turned to her, his voice low. "You know, last Christmas I asked you to stay one night, but this time I am asking for something more." She smiled gently. "How much more?" "As long as you will have me," he said. She laughed, the sound light and full of life. "That depends. Can you promise not to work through Christmas this year?" "I can promise to try," he said, grinning. "And if I fail, then I will drag you out myself," she replied. "You have my word." They stood there, under the maple tree, the evening air wrapping around them like a quiet blessing. Alexander reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver charm shaped like a star. "For the top of the tree," he said. "The one you never got to finish last year." She looked up at him, smiling through tears. "It is perfect." He nodded, his voice soft. "So are you." As the first lights flickered on across the courtyard, Lila placed the charm in her hand and whispered, "Merry early Christmas, Alexander." He smiled, his heart full in a way it had not been in years. "Merry Christmas, Lila," he said. And for the first time, those words felt like home.